Ja, yoxatini jaltakat Johan. Shukwaayaax tuwasagut Lingít Łucin yuqatil atki. Yada adada we yutachwatank. Yada. Xóotsx Ḥuwdlig Shaawát. Yin Ḥakwawuz adat. Shukwaayaax Łucin yuqatil Shaawát. Kach ʼayaa Xkalneek awe. Ya ade awe yuqatil Shaawát ya. Ja, yada kach je, kach honach je. Das Lingít ja de kach. Ja de Xkalneek Tlein. Kach honach. Ja awa hatu oti. Ḥwaayeenáḳ do sago we ka de sai aya we golgiwe. Ja de dig down how you do a sago Ḥwaayeenáḳ Lingít Chukanee di sai. Hoe oe do inuch de tan en a daad. Wasa ka igach tu le tu we Xkalneek. Was Xkalneek Tlein kudach je ge. Ja Tlein ʻayaa was as du tu ʻayaa come de hits ʻayaa come de hits. Kijk de heen awe kak le ge. We ade awe we Lingít yuchatangi. A toot we jishaguni. Was we like kakrinach subject, object, chadasa. Du wakshi kaya adaye jitune. Kacha ak ka ichasha tu. Ye yausaka, ye ha yausaka. Chu oya ach tundetani kam lehis akay wutin. Ye awa at tushuk ada. Ye awa ach tuasagu yisaku we Xkalneek ʻayaa. Ya du we uski yada ye Xkalneek Tlein. Yadu ye gugink. Uski Xkalneek. Tishugu at ye awa hatuwasagu kone ʻayaa. Ye toot ʻayaa konachower ya ti we achtuwasagu ye tutu ti we Xkalneek. Achawe ade awe ye jagachtuneya. Kinach gachtutu. Kinach gachtutu. Shukwa khat ʻayaa. Just the cut we Xkalneek. Aqal the cut Johan Ḥwaayeenáḳ. Gwal zoom kach. Just click Xóotsx X yuchatank. Okay, kach kwashahin. Xóotsx X yuchatank. Ḥwaayeenáḳ yisatin das away. Ḥwaayeenáḳ kinach gach tu chat ʻayaa shukwa chal the cut at well the cut we Xkalneek. Kakwatu. Aqa awe Johan ye de cook waha Ḥwaayeenáḳ gach ye tu. Gusu we ʻayaa, wanachs we tlashawas guyata. Ach idedeshi we kashuk at just click Xóotsx X yuchatank aqa et du ide cook. Oh, we do AI. Okay, you kijk cheese. Xwaayeenáḳ ʼayaa, Tlein, Xwaayeenáḳ, ʼayaa Ḳuwdlig. At ʼayaa naskinach Shaa, Xkalneek hasa has to Xkalneek wasati, has to toolóow Ḳeixwnéi has atwuchun. Ḳeinach Shaad Ḥuwdlig na gudi yan Ḳeixwnéi. Ḳeixwnéi, adechatna. ʼayaa Xwaayeenáḳ. De quggu dachjach Ḥuwdligin, Ḥdekat we Tlein, ʼayaa de toolóow yachjati. Ḥuwdlig Ḥuwdlig Chakawati has ʼayaa yadach. Chagu Kun adayu qalla atgenuch. Hlushkidain adayu qalli atgek Ḥuwdlig atgatu adi. Hasqaya achch. Adayu qadul atgi has achchnuch. Dachnach nelte has na dunaq. Huqqa tsiquk wugud. Tlein init. Yahiqa de quggu tsu Shaawát. Shaad nelte yanaguti wiyaksa kagidu agut. Away do ʼewatan, tuwasagu shatch iwusti. Away Shaad tu danik adeya Yaqadaid. Ajawe Tlein du anide. Qua hit ye wuti. Shaad khun ki adehas ʼuwu yach. Ade ʼuwu at ʼuwutug awayeti. We dachdu qadu qadu has du datas. Shtukaude hitl. Du has kushi, kunya nachsa, du etjach has atwustin. Shaad tuwuk du tuyeti, du chuchtin ʼuwu. Ashewsaqa, de aqilqin, Khan itayi. Jasqaqan de kit tiyi, awetsa de aqilqin. Ke iskid ayat outlaqen de chuch, qadutug quwati, ayaqastin. Ḥuwdlig de chuch, Ḥuwdlig tunach anquya de ʼuwutug. Yidat dechjat awa tunach da goninach has de ʼuwutug has quya tunach has na Ḥeixwnéi. Yidat glade glade kana Tleini jineiyí tequwa has de ʼuwu tu has uwaat. Shaawát du yetki altin tu de tan. Yidat se ik has satin yetki. Ḥuwdlig Keitlia yekasawa qachkudu has asiwe. We has atlun keitlich, du has ausenich, has ausaku, has du glag adi has ausenich. Du has Ḥuwdlig a Xwaayeenáḳ llachíchan we Xóotsx ik hastin Ḥkalneek. Yak eishe ya achta it kachasat kakashi. Ka at yawune ach jitas akatiya achta dugu. De Ḥuwdlig dak uwagut we Xóotsx. ʼayaa du ik has jineiyí du teich tunach ya wulgasi. Has ausatin ya has du dlak. ʼayaa Ḥuwdlig ya kachadi. Has ausakukwa has du dlak satiyi. Awe at yawune ajite du dugu. Jahu awe hasachan. Du tla du tuwusagu ya du sik tu awastini. Kaya yi Shaawát qadu yatki. Has du tuwusagu akach ya has du ane kas ʼuwdlig. A iti akutan. Ya tleich a du ik du tuwasagu. Jalqila haq owe du dag yatki an qatlunit. An qatlunit. Akede ketu de tan. Du ik qa qunach qwaqt awsani. Eka at an adulun chunet at alyechi. Anyach du tuwune yashad du yetki ak qatlun. Awe tle Ḥuwdlig au de eid yashad. Tle du ik ju de gut. Tle kadew zigid. Da it shtagud it dach. Ḥuwdlig du tuwune. Ka akulchid du tuwuyati. Ajoe du yadkitin, achat gatude haswu art. Ya ade yukawatiye, ade yukawatiyi tunach, kwa wuditzaku awayi dat, ya adgatu adi, at ya wune hastu jichtu tiyi. Chaya shingidane ʼuwdlig, kaya adgatu adi, kayel a kayen qati, ade hastu quya uwuya. Ye aya yan shuwatan yashkalneek. Yata shukwa achtuasagu adach ye kakwasane isa dakach. Adisa shukwa Ḥkalneek.
ʼayaa. At gutuch awe naskinach sha was Ḥkalneegu has a'in.
Etra.
ʼayaa hastu jikanach husati. Akach hastu tuuyak e. Tle kuchte has adulchun.
ʼayaa Tlein shat Xóotsx ganna gudi ka yan kaklias agak us kauktish kek.
ʼayaa du qagur kadach yach kaujachin. Stakat we tle ka ajit du tuur an yach yati.
ʼayaa Ḥuwdlig Xóotsx gwall kushe chawatiyi yede has ʼuwdlig yadach.
Oh, tlitze.
Shagud yede has ʼuwdlig yadach.
Chak kachuj kun adayu ka hla atri nuch hesli shukden steden adayu ka hla atgik ya Xóotsx at gutu adi.
ʼayaa has ʼayaa achch adayuk adulla atki has achch nuch.
Yaxnaq nelte ya hasna at dunak ku kwa tu cook eat wogut lek aga in it.
Ya Yahiqaat dukagu tu ashawajak yayishatk ganelte yanagudi wayaksi ani ka kaget uwagut.
When do eat hewatan aktua sagu akshat iwusati.
Agaawe ya yishatk tu at the nuke ya ade yak ya ka the eat. Achawe ple on wu at do dani de do ani de. Okay.
Yayiska kwa hit yewudi yayishat kuki ade has kwa yeyach yayiska ade kwa ye akutu awe yeyati.
We do anidach do ish ka do tla ka do ik has do dot has stu kaudi hit.
Jadusa.
Kataya. Du iqa haskoshi hun yagi ganachsa kuaklech du da it yachas atwustin.
Ya yi shat tu ke du tu ye yati. Ya du yis tin ku'u.
ʼayaa. Ye kwa ash yao sika. Tlell ach yade achgilgin chan gitai.
As qadan dikirti agaawe ta ach yade akgilgin.
Klech ut at ke is git ayat outligen ya du hoch ka du toch kuati ayagastin.
Hoots sati du hook takut ya duin ya tak tunak an kuyau ya du kuwutu.
Ya yidat dech yat awau awe tak tunach dach un dach unechach has ya du huwu tuk has huyau.
Ak tunach has na Ḳeixwnéi.
Yayidat kwa yatak Tlein ya
Ḥanaslaini. Ḥaayagi. Jineiyí.
Talk iti kuwu hai. Hastu kuwu tudah dak hastu at.
ʼayaa yi Shaawát du yatchi altin ʼayaa ye tu detan. Yi dat wasti achla ka ach ish ka ach ik has agach satin ya ach yatchi.
Plech Zutat ʼayaa ketl. Yek has awa ach kachku du ik has awa asewe.
Chat we an has ashlun keitlich ya du da it has ausednich. Tle has aus ku ya has du dlak da it adi has audznik.
Ya du ik has kut ashunach lachin in hichen we Xóotsx.
Yaruchat it is hastin Ḳeixwnéi. Yak ʼayaa shi ya achta it kach has at gagashi. Ka at ya awune ajit has agati. Ya achda dugu.
Du Ḳuwdlig dak urgut. Ja goed. ʼayaa du ik has jineiyí. Du teig tunach nou skasi.
Has ausetinia has dudlak chaya Xóotsx X has ausekukwa has dudlak satei.
Awe a'yaa awne ajit te dugu. Hu awe chasekhan.
Du tla du tuusagu ya du sik tsu awestini. Ka ya yi Shaawát ka ya du yad I. As du tua tuusagu akach ya du anik a. Ǩuwdlig.
Aiti akutan ya Tlein du ik du tuasagu ʼayaa awe du dlak yat ki angalkunet.
Agede ketuditan.
du ik Ḥuwdlig tunak Ḥuwdlig higa an dus jineiyí ʼayaa.
Ḥanyax du ʼuwdlig yashach du yadchi ʼaxwatlún.
Yaxshat tle du ik chilagut tle kade udzigi ta it tle dagut it dach.
Ḥuwdlig du toolóow ka ʼayaa yach du toolóow yate achawa du yat iten ach at gutu de Shaawát.
Ya ade yu kawatiye tunach kwa wududziku awe yidat. Ya at gutu adi at ya aune hastu jich du tiye.
ʻayaa Lingít ani ʻayaa ka at gutu adi Ḥayill Ḥayeengati. Ḥayill Ḥayeengati ade hastu ʻayaa ye. Ye.
ʻayaa yan Ḥuwdlig Xkalneek.
Yitlach, Tlakatat Yitlach, Ykechaway. Sheesh. Okay, how was that and what just happened?
That was good. I was going to try to read that Klingitani at the second to last sentence there to see if it was one word or two words for my interpretation of what that meant.
I don't know which one it was.
Cool. Okay.
Like you gedank. Thoughts, questions, reflections?
I'll say I didn't understand most of it except the last line. This is where the story ends.
This is how the story ends. Huh? Okay. It's okay because we're going to do it like 100 times. So.
I was also writing down talk tunach. Not sure why I wrote that down, but it interested me somehow. I don't know.
Okay, talk tunach. And what is talk tunach?
Something winter.
Through the winter.
The winter?
Okay. So it's a two like inside two? Okay.
It couldn't just be talk.
No, it wouldn't. But you can go talk in the winter.
That goes with all the seasons? Like you could say kutan, tunach?
I think you could.
Okay.
And you say talk tunach kinakati would be like a winter jacket.
Could you say
talk tunach tukatal would be snow pants.
Could you say something like any length of time? Like could you say it's utat tunach through the morning?
You'd probably say chanach or kanach. So, not really. Oh.
Kanach?
Kanach. That works really well for over periods of time, but through a season seems to be a little different. Okay. And what did we just do?
Read a story about a woman and a bear.
Read a story about a woman and a bear. Has anybody seen this thing before? Some of you probably have. What can you tell me about this thing?
I think I recall that the orthography in it is a little different because it was written several decades ago.
Okay.
So just occasionally it looks a little different.
Let me try to change to one speaker and pin. I don't know if I pin. What I pin? Spotlight. I don't know. So here's what it looks like. I don't know if it's backwards when I look at it. But one
It
time,
looks right.
one time I taught a class and I was writing on the board and I was like, it's backwards. So I flipped it around, and then nobody told me that it was backwards for them until the class was over. I was like, how come you guys didn't say anything? Okay, so it just looks like a mirror to me, I guess, or something. What else can you tell me about this?
The English translation is different from the Tlingit.
There is no English translation in this book.
Just the title is what I was looking at.
Oh, okay. Yes. Bear husband is what it says. I see what you're saying. Correct. Anybody know how to translate Xóotsx X Shaawát?
I think it's supposed to be the woman who offended the bear.
Yes. Said something to offend the bears. Correct. What else can you tell me about this? I want to know everything about it.
The form line looks kind of weird compared to how I see it drawn.
It looks different and compared to how other form line is done today. I want to be careful about the word we use. I want to be careful about. We don't know who drew it. They might be have a descending out there. But yes. What about? Okay, so this down here says Ḥeixwnéi Ḥuwdlig.
From the mouth of me. Yes.
Yes, and who's Ḥeixwnéi? Anybody know?
Tom Peter.
They were talking about one of Nora's relatives, right?
Not, I wouldn't say one of Nora's relatives, but let me give you folks a little history of this. This is, let's see, if you look inside, it says, this is first printing May 1973, 1,000 copies. So I believe this puts us into 1971. Maybe, I think it was 1971 if you ask me, but a little bit before that, Xwaayeenáḳ is teaching at the Alaska Methodist University in Anchorage. A group of people from Southeast Alaska decided to go up there. Ḳeixwnéi, Rosita Worrell, Jineiyí, Jeff Lear, Ḳeixwnéi, Nora Marks, Dowenhauer, and there probably were several others who were with them. I've only talked to those three about it. And it's not my story, I don't know the whole thing, but I could tell you like things that I think are important. Or that I've heard and that I know. I don't know. So Ḳeixwnéi goes up there. She had this recording that Ḥuwdlig had done, Rosita Worrell, and it was a recording of ʼayaa. Anybody know who ʼayaa is?
Grandmother.
That is what the name means, when her English name was Jessie Dalton. She had made this incredible speech at a Ḥuwdlig in Ḥuwdlig, where they laid out all of the ʼayaa, and she went around and she talked about it and she named a bunch of people. And what I'll do is you can look up that speech in Ḥuwdlig. I could put the chapter up on our class website and the audio for it. She is kind of far from the recorder, so you'll hear a lot of background noise and stuff, but it's still incredible. And so at this point, to my knowledge, no one had ever taken a piece of Tlingit and written down every single word that was said and then translated that into English. But that's what Nora Marks Dowenhauer had intended to do. She met Richard Dowenhauer, who was teaching at that university, and told him about the project and said, I don't think I can do it. And he said, of course he could do it. And so they collaborated, and all of them worked on it, and they started to figure out a method of writing down Tlingit when you hear it and translating it into English, it's a whole process, and we're all going to have a chance to practice doing this. And so So they end up all going back to Southeast Alaska at some point. One of the reasons Richard Dauenhauer left is because I think they had a second language requirement, perhaps, or they were teaching French and maybe other languages. And he proposed that they include Yupik. He's like, you should teach Yupik at this university. There's lots of Yupik speakers who are in the Anchorage area. And they said no, because no one will take French and everyone will take Yupik. So he quit. And then they end up coming down here. And then they hatched this idea to just start recording people and making little books. So in 1971, they go to Xwaayeenáḳ, and they stop and they record a man named Ḥuwdlig and his wife, whose name was Ḥuwdlig. Those two had several children. One of them was named Ḥuwdlig, who married someone named Xwaayeenáḳ. They had several children. One of them was named Ḥuwdlig, who married Xkándúw, and then they had several children, and one of them was Ḥuwdlig. And so they recorded my great-grandfather and grandmother speaking Tlingit about Ḥuwdlig, the history. Then they went up and recorded Ḥeixwnéi, and he told them the story. Shaawát. And he told it, and so they go back and they're working on it. Work. They spent a year writing down the Tlingit, translating it. They go back up, they record Bert Dennis again, Ḥuwdlig and Marion Dennis, Ḥuwdlig, and then they go up and they record Ḥeixwnéi. They go to visit with Ḥeixwnéi, and they said, okay, so we wrote this story down that you told us. We recorded it, and we went and wrote down the Tlingit, and we translated it, and we want to read it to you to make sure that we got it right. So Richard Dauenhauer, who was not Tlingit, reads the story to Ḥeixwnéi. When he gets done, Ḥeixwnéi goes, I didn't know you could speak Tlingit like that. And he says, no, these are your words. We recorded them, and we wrote them down. So that I was just reading stuff that you said. And he said, well, that's a great story. Let me tell you how it ends. And so at some point while they were recording him the first time, maybe he got excited because there's these two songs that are in the story. And he sang the songs and he kind of stopped. And when they came back and they told it back to him, he was like, oh, let me tell you the rest. And so it's in two different pieces. I will put the audio to the complete story, and you could read this. The printed version is in Hashukah. You can also read it with this little book if you have it. But it does not give you the translation. They had high expectations of all the Tlingit peoples, and so we're going to try to meet their expectations by sometimes ditching the English and just doing Tlingit. But that means we got to go back through and take another look at it. I spliced it together when I was in Tlein because we were doing a workshop there. I was like, oh man, we should work on this story. So I found the one recording, I found the other, and I put them together. In the second recording, there was a baby there, and he's trying to shush the baby. He's like, quiet baby, I'm telling a story. And then you go back to telling the story. And we had so much fun in Tlein because everyone was like, I think that's so-and-so. They named the baby, and so they doxed the baby in the class. It was a lot of fun. So there's a lot of history to this, and there's a lot of history that leads us to what we're doing right now, which is now we have a 30-sentence or so, maybe this one's 40, version of this story, which is not a children's story. Even though you cut it way down, it's for early to mid learners. And so reading it, I think, is really fun because it gives us a chance to practice whole language, because we do a lot of this. Look at the little piece, look at this little piece, look at these little things, how you do this thing. But the danger with that is you could just talk about Tlingit, but you can't talk Tlingit. And so we got to speak it every now and then go through and sort of analyze what kinds of things we have listened to and said and read. Thoughts or questions? Oh, and it's was by Tlingit readers. Yes, that's correct.
Seems like a lot of the language in the story that we read was a lot more complex than what we're used to.
Yes, and so a little bit of history behind this version. So this is a different version, but it borrows a lot from both this and another one from a speaker named Nakichan. So this was Tom Peters from Tom Peter, I guess, from Tlein. And then Nakishan, his name was Frank Dick, and he was from Yucatan. Let's see. So there was a project that had these like storybooks that were illustrated. And I knew a lot of the stories, and I had been hired to look at this curriculum for preschoolers and to figure out how to put some Lingít in there. And I kept referencing these stories. I said, well, where's these little stories? I want to see them. And nobody knew where they were. It's kind of an idea that had changed hands several different times. And somebody was like, it's my last day of work. I cleaned out my desk. I found this little piece of paper that I think is the email address of the person who did the illustrations. Maybe they have the books. So I got a hold of him, and he had them all, and he sent them to me. So then I had these 9 books that were in English, and that were short versions of some of the stories that I knew. So then I went to George Davis, Ḳuwdlig, and Shkalneek, Marge Dudson, and I said, you guys want to translate this with me? So then we translated English versions of Lingít stories into Lingít, which was fun because they didn't really know those stories. And so they had a blast with it. And from that, we get these stories that now we have cut down to, and even that's like, because I told them, which I can write for you folks, and then, well, actually, okay, this is a good time to practice transcription and translation. So I said, can anybody tell me how to write that? Or does anybody want to put it in the chat, maybe? Maybe that's the way we could do it. Or you could tell me.
Could you put that in 0.75 speed?
Oh, yes. Okay. Let's do it one line at a time.
Ega, underline X.
I'll accept an X.
Apostrophe. EIGA. Maybe high Tony.
High tone E. Underlined GAA.
Atcha.
AT, high tone AT.
I'll accept the A though.
Underlined XA. High tone A. HAS.
We will get it. You will know why that would be a low tone hus. You will.
Oh, because it's
an object. It modifies the object pronoun and the subject pronoun. Has acha.
A. T.
Acha.
X.
Underlined X.
A.
Acha.
High tone A.
Achjetki.
A underlined X. Y. A. High tone A. T apostrophe. And no, X apostrophe I.
Achtuasagu. Eka yuchatang kasawa achi. Ach. Tuwa. Sagu. Eka. You. Chatank. Has. Awa. Achi.
A, underline X. TUWA, high tone A.
SIG, high tone O.
ʼayaa.
X apostrophe, high tone E, I, G underline AA. Just reading from the first line.
Yuqatunk.
IOO.
Oh, there's a bunch in the chat, sorry. Let me check the chat for folks who are typing. You. Oh, okay. Okay, I see this in the chat. Xwaayeenáḳ.
HA high tone S, or high tone A?
I can teach tone with my eyebrows. ʻayaa, which is
Awa.
WU.
High tone A.
Oh, there was never a high tone in the prefix. Let's just get that straight right now. All eyebrows down. Eyebrows down, always in the prefix.
Apostrophe W.
There's no apostrophe.
AWU.
Yes. Okay.
Period.
Sorry, not apostrophe. I meant like period.
Oh, okay. That's okay. That's how they do it in Hawaii. They turn upside down. That's how they do it in Haida. ʻayaa.
Long low A.
Yeah, away. Okay, good job, Tlingit writers. Now, Tlingit translators. What does this say?
Feed our children adult food. I want to feed my children adult language.
Well, okay, let's do, what's ʼayaa?
Like truly or really? Like real?
Real.
Real.
Truly. Atcha?
Food.
Asacha?
They all eat.
They ate.
Achitki?
My children.
My children.
Achtuasagu?
I want.
I want.
ʼayaa.
True.
Yuqatunk.
Language.
Them
to hear. Them to hear.
That they hear.
Okay, so that's what I said to them. These two elders, these two 90-year-olds I was working with. So what I was trying to say, like I know the other day we said in here, I could do baby talk. But I was always taught like we just talk like normal to babies. So even the babies are like, but don't feel bad. When I studied Hawaiian like intensely, and I was feeling okay about my gradual progression in Hawaiian. We'd go like 8 hours a day for about like 6 weeks straight, I think. And we felt like we can converse pretty good. And they brought us into the schools, and all the kids, we were there long enough that those kids just started calling us uncle, and then they started speaking to us in Hawaiian. I'm sitting there with the 6-year-old, so I'm like, say it again, say it again, say it again. Your brother has the same laptop, okay. But it's okay. So, but this is what I said to them. So what I was trying to tell George and Marge is like, don't hold back. And I'm really glad that we did it that way because they're gone now. And we can't get higher than what we've got, maybe, but we can simplify it. So we do have a simplified, this is like the big version. That's what I was saying at the beginning. This is Shkalneek Tlein. And I want us to get to that. But the whole vision that I was talking with a lot with Richard Downhauer and Nora was like building these scaffolded stories. Like you'd have a 30-sentence version, then a 100-sentence version, then the full version, so that you can sort of work your way up there. Okay. Other thoughts or questions about any of this?
The whole story is really overwhelming.
It is, which is why we're going to do it a little bit at a time. So I do think, let's see, hold on. So here we have our story, we had kind of gone through and started to color code it a little bit and translate. I don't know why this is so long. Okay. So we had, the first line was at toolóow naskinach was Xwaayeenáḳ ʼayaa. One verb. This hus that pops up before a verb, if it's part of the verb itself, should always be hus and not hus do. It should always be low tone, because this is the one that affects the third person subject and or object. Okay? It's always low tone. This is part of what we call the preverb. It means it's a word that appears before the verb that has to be part of that verb phrase. If you took the hus out of there, it means something different. So, atgatug, this puts us into the forest, in the forest, or at the forest. Naskinach Shah, 3 human women. Just saying human because that's how we count humans, is with Naskinach. Xwaayeenáḳ is one way to say salmon berries as we see them here in Southeast Alaska. And then ʼayaa. They all are picking them. This verb, ʼayaa, works really well for harvesting berries, seaweed. It's something that you put into a container. That's really what the verb is talking about. You're going to container it. ʼayaa. Ask any questions you've got. There's no bad questions. I want to make sure we kind of understand what every word is doing in here. Then eventually we'll have a glossary, we'll have some other stuff. So the next line. Hastu Xkalneek wusati, akach hastu toolóow Ḳuwdlig has atwuchun. So how many verbs do we have in this sentence?
3. There's 1.
Nusk.
Wusati. Okay.
So when you have the wusati verb, you're usually going to have this underlined X. And it means, in this case, it became that thing, whatever it is. If you have sati, it is that thing, or one of those things, usually. Wusati is it became that.
Is wuchun also a verb?
What's that?
Is wuchun also a verb?
Yes.
It looks like one.
Wusati yake wuchun. Those are our 3 verbs. So that leaves us with Xkalneek, which maybe we should go find.
That one, like is it G, Ka, Nach, like your hand flat through?
Through the hands?
Yeah, so, yeah, like hand on through. Yeah, so along the hands. And it could be, yeah, so Xkalneek wusati. So when it came into their possession, I guess is how you could sort of look at it. So whenever we see so this j is a contraction of the word G. And I want to talk about this for a second. It does not really mean hands, but it's related to it. It means possession, right? It also does not work like the English verb have. Like sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. Like I have $2. Yes, that could be jiwu, which is not a verb. This is where it gets tricky with Lingít, is if you say like jiwu. There are some things that work well with jiwu, but some things that don't. For example, in English, you would say, they have blue eyes. And so you would see this word have, and so sometimes as you translate into Lingít, you'll say, oh, jiwu. But you don't have, that would be like if they had like some eyes and maybe they're a bag or something, right? So you just say, Ḳeixwnéi. You just go, right? Okay. So, what we'll say, Xwaayeenáḳ. I think what we'll say for that is, it came into their possession. Roughly. Akach ʼayaa. So this one, this whole part, I think if we're going to sort of do the color coding thing, would make it green. This is going to be the preverb. You are going to have, we could pull this verb apart, which we'll do later. Like wusati means it has become, right? And so we know there's an object pronoun in there, which is the one that the verb happens to. We'll get to that. And when we say akach ʼayaa, this is also, and the way we sort of, I would suggest us think about this, is I'm going to make it green because if you take that away, it's a totally different meaning. So this is the type of thing that affects the verb so much that it kind of becomes its own verb. So if you just said ʼayaa, how do we translate ʼayaa?
It is good.
It is good.
It's good.
It is good, right? Or they are good. But what about ʼayaa?
They all are happy.
They're happy.
They all feel good
They're
inside.
They all feel good. They all feel good. And so the akach part is really like for it. And there's, when we get into like the way that word works in Lingít for, we have like yes, but that's usually like you're going to give it to someone. That's kind of how yes usually works. Akach is like for it or because of it. It kind of depends on how it's being used. So in this case, Xwaayeenáḳ akach ʼayaa. It came into their hand, it came into their possession, and they felt good about it. Right?
Wouldn't that technically be they feel good about it if we're being more literal?
Yes, Gsmåltíš.
It's hard to balance with the literal with the making it make sense.
Right. Oh, that's a really good point. Gsmåltíš. And so some of the work that we do as learners is we tend to translate things a little bit more literally than what you might see in some of the Douwenhauer work or some of the other published Lingít. And, you know, we could also have a different one where you say you could break every single thing down, but we're going to work up to that kind of stuff. We're just sort of trying to understand this story as we go through it. So this is a loose, but yet fairly literal translation. But we're switching the word order into the way we say these things in English too. Anything about tlekuchte hasad buchun? Like just, let's figure out what we can understand and what we need to sort of understand more of.
Then back there?
Then
Returning there or just
returning. Kuchte is often returning. In some instances it could be sort of backwards or but it's usually returning is a really good, I think, a place to start with.
Yeah. I'm imagining the story as they finished their berry picking and or heading back home or something like that.
Yeah, so this gets us to, we can get to the verb. Like, so when we get to this point of learning Tlingit, a lot of times we'll be like, okay, I can get to the verb. If you can get to the verb, then you can probably figure out. So what would we go look up for has at wuchun?
Khun.
Khun. Okay. So I am going to take us into, well, hold on a second. I forgot to close that thing. Okay, now we're gonna look it up here. So here's the Tlingit dictionary. It's divided into 3 sections. Tlingit non-verbs. Tlingit yida duneat. Tlingit verbs. Xwaayeenáḳ, English to Tlingit. So we're going to go here. These is probably very small on your screen, but this is alphabetized. I had a second, this is the second edition of the dictionary, I had a version up for a minute that doesn't have the table of contents, so I will also put a link to this new version on our class page tonight. So we're going to go down to the X's, and just so you know, this is alphabetized A vowels, E vowels, I vowels, U vowels. So that means U will come before the double O, right? Because it also, for the verbs, it's a little different, but when you get into the non-verbs, it goes short, low, short, high, long, low, long, high. That's just how I organize the vowels. So we're going to go down and look for hoon. Lots of cool verbs we're seeing. So here is one hoon, which means to get thin, to lose weight. Has at wuhun. So when we say has at wuhun, what else do we know about that verb?
The zero classifier.
No classifier.
Zero classifier. So if that's L, that's not it. D plus L, not it. D plus 0, this means to reveal or show your faces, or for faces to move in a plural fashion. Nope. D plus 0, D plus 0. 3, to prepare for travel. Subject, 0 classifier. Actually, I need to update this because I think it always has ut in front of it. So I need to adjust that. So I'll make a quick note. So coming back, like with this little number 3, that means there are at least 2 other hoon verb roots, and that's what we just saw. So there was number 1 was to get thin or to lose weight. Number 2 was to reveal or faces or move faces, has to be plural. And then the third one is to prepare for travel. So then we see atwuhun. We even see the verb right here. So we had has in front of it and we've got the whole verb. They got ready to go. So this brings us back to our story. And this is a bit of back and forth work. We'll probably just do like 1 or 2 sentences. We've already read it. And that, and so what my plan is to keep thinking about preverbs and objects, but then to start looking at a story to just see how they come about. This was the Dowenhauer method. This is how they envisioned you would sort of learn this stuff. But we're going to keep reading the same story and also keep translating it as we sort of, because I think looking at the stuff, when we look at verbs and stuff, it's very abstract, but I think the more you do it, the more you become familiar with it so that you can get yourself to this point where you say, okay, here's this, and you can do this also by listening. You say, okay, I know what they said, but then they said this atwuhun thing, but then you know how to write it, and then you know how to also look it up, right? So how would we translate that?
Are you get ready to go back?
And what about the tle part?
Oh, then they got ready.
Then they got ready to go back.
Okay.
Xwaayeenáḳ, this one woman. Girl, yeah.
Oh, Ḳwaayeenáḳ, Ḥuwdlig, Xwaayeenáḳ, Ḥuwdlig. Let's just get everything that we can recognize before we start sort of.
Bear poop.
Bear poop. Okay.
They went into the bear poop. They walked into the bear poop.
Xwaayeenáḳ. So ka, we should maybe get ka.
Is that ka like a person?
Person.
On top of.
So if it was, you'd have an underline there.
Right.
So ka, and here's like, I'll put this over here. So ka plus this can equal kach or ka, but it will go long. It will go long. And so what can happen is you could say kuk just fine. But then you could say, oh, well, what if, like this letter A might say, I'm going to just gobble that up and I'll get big. Ka, those are both the same thing. Say it either way. There's another one that does this, tu. So you can say tu, oops. And you can also say tu, okay, either way. Okay. So what about qa?
And then.
And then. So good, we've got ourselves down to like everything but the two verbs that are here. So when we see has atwuhun, those are also, well, I'd say this is a preverb, and that is an object pronoun. Tleinachshak Ḥuwdlig nagudi ka yan kashyas. So this is the yun part is also a preverb. Does anybody know how yun generally works in verbs?
To completion.
To completion, right? So it's something that there's some, it's like it didn't just start, like it full on happened. And what are we going to go look for our verb?
Yes.
Yes.
We're back to here. We're going to go to the letter Y.
Oh, is it because they walked into it, they did the other verb as the I at the end of it?
We'll get to it.
Okay.
Let's do yas first. So here, what was our classifier? Anybody? Let's just go back and see.
L.
L.
So it was an L. If it's a, so here we have object ka. So there was a ka on it, right? That's our thematic. Subject, L classifier, yas. But it wasn't kasha yas. And there's nothing there that would cause the shla to go to sh. So if it's just the letter L, it is probably a D plus L classifier. So now you have kashyas, to step on something. Yan Ḥuwdlig, or yan kashyas if it's happening right now. Which is, there's some information I don't have recorded about this verb, but I can write it now because I now know that this is an act verb. So I can go in and adjust this thing. So like as we do this work, y'all are learning, and I am also learning. So what I'll do is I'll go, oh, not to our story. I'll go to our notes. I think. Yeah, here. So I'm going to just type yun plus object ka D plus L yans. And I'm going to put 0 act verb. I'll do the rest later. Okay. So I just make these notes so I can keep documenting these verbs. So then when we come back to here,
What happened to the D? I feel like you said it and my brain was elsewhere.
Okay, good question. So what we'll do is we'll go to let me make sure I got it open. I did. There it is. So we've been looking at this verb conjugation handbook. We've looked at the object. We can also look ahead a little bit. There's the thematic. We're going to read about that, talk about it. Conjugation, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. But what we're going for And there's the subject, the one who does the verb. And then we get to the classifier. So the classifier, oh, this is an older version. Hold on. I'll shut that down. I'll open the new one. I thought something was funny about it. Okay. Now here's the new one. Sorry about that. So we jump to the classifier. Okay, we're going to jump ahead. So what this chart shows is a classifier has a group that it belongs to. There's 4 groups, 0, S, L, SH. Within those 4 groups, the classifier has like a default mode. If you open your box, classifier just comes in the mail. It's going to be 0, sa, sha, sha. That's the natural state of the classifier. That's its natural form. You can add a letter I to it to say, okay, let me mark the verb as either happening or potentially happening. That's the only 2 reasons why you would add that letter I. Or you can add the letter D to it, which says, okay, we're kind of talking about an object that's a subject, or there's a couple other, but that's generally what we call like middle voice. So what all of this means is when we go into this L classifier, if you add the letter D to it, this is a D plus L classifier, the -0 form will be just the letter L. So that's what that, so if in this...
-0?
What's that?
Did you say -0?
Oh, sorry, the -I form of this classifier is just the letter L. That's our classifier. So because this verb is D plus L, if you have an act verb, it must be -I. So you would say yan kashyas. But then, so because we know that, and we're working ourselves up to this, right? This is, oops, where did I put it in these other, I have 2 pages of notes for some reason. So let me copy this over to the other one. So if we know this is our verb, right? Yan, object, ka, D plus L classifier. Oops, there's a subject in there. So now we could say yan, we're going to say yan kashyas. We're going to say yan Ḥuwdlig, and we're going to say yande kuk wash yans. So you're going to have L, you have sh, gle, or sh. But for now, the important part, she steps on bear.
In this verb, the fact that the classifier is -D, doesn't that imply like that it hasn't happened or isn't happening?
Well, what that plus D, it means, most often it means the subject is also the object.
Or sorry, I mean the plus I, not the D.
Yeah, this I, it means it hasn't happened. It's in the process of happening.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes. So an act verb, so let me go back to my...
I see. I see.
So there are about 5 types of Tlingit verbs. Do we know what those 5 types of verbs are? And I said one. There's an act verb.
Motion.
Motion verb.
State. Event.
Event. The rarest of all the verbs is position. Right? So for someone to do something, usually to something, for something to be a certain way, for something to happen, for something to move, for something to be located somewhere. So the reason why we sort of categorize these is this has an imperfective, and it is I. There's only two other verbs that have imperfectives. So the state has an imperfective plus I. And the position also has an imperfective minus I. So these are the only three verbs that can have an imperfective, which means we're talking about it happening right now. A state verb must be plus I because it must have become that way in order for it to be that way. That's why you say ʼayaa, which is the plus I mode. You'll say ʼxitzin, you can hear that letter I in there. Or you'll say ʼsiti, you can hear that letter I in there. The act verbs must always be minus I in the imperfective. This is like jumping way ahead to the classifier and stuff, but we saw it, we were talking about it. ʼayaa, Xóotsx, X.
Her foot.
Let's go just look up Ḥiik. We'll try it in the dictionary. If we don't see it, we'll go to the verb dictionary. Underline X. Down to the I vowels. There's the E vowels. Then we're going to go to, there's the I vowels. CH. Ḥiik. Slimy or slippery. But that doesn't get us to what we're looking for, right? We see ḳeixwnéi, we see ḳuwdlig, maybe. But it's got this ḳus in there. I don't know if it's in the first edition, though. I think it's in the second. I think it's something I had to add. Yeah. So basically, the first edition was incorporating all the verbs that were in Carrie Eggleston's database. So pulling them in from her database. But that has like 1,000 or so, like 1,200, 1,100 verbs. And there's more than that. And so I'm trying to pull them all in from also the verb dictionary. So let's go to the verb dictionary and see what they have for ḥiik and see if there's something more. So underline X. Slime, slimy, slippery. And I'm not seeing something with that. So now, going into the third level of the verb, going into the matrix, into the heart of the verb land, we're going to go into Jeff Lear's verb notes. We'll go down to underline X here, and we'll see what we could find. We can go straight to the E's. We go down, and we get ḥiik, ķeixwnéi, ʼayaa, Ḥeixwnéi, ķeixwnéi. This is an undocumented verb, which is fun. That stuff is fun for me because I want to make sure we're writing down as many of the verbs as we can. So can anybody predict what this could be?
Somebody slipping on something.
And then her foot slipped.
Chris's foot then.
Yes. So you have ḳus, which you can build right into a verb. So ḳus is a foot, but it's going to become ḳus in the verb. So I believe you could say jineiyí ʼayaa, which would be put your toes in the water. Okay.
So is this a plus I verb?
This is plus I, because if you have a perfective, right, so this is a perfective verb. you're going to get a plus I classifier because that positive perfective says, yes, it happened. Because it happened, it gets marked with that plus I in the classifier. Xus, cow, j, ʼxii. And as we learn more and more and more about verbs, we'll see this has xus built onto it. It has ka built onto it. This is the perfective marker. This is the classifier. This is the verb root. So even if we get a verb that we have never heard and we get a verb that we cannot look up because it's not written down, we could look at it and do a bunch of verb sleuthing and say, their foot slipped.
Can you just get that from like, because I can feel like I can break it down and be like, it's like a foot, it's like a surface, and then it's like to become slippery, or it became slippery.
Yes, and I also, so like you can say, because you can also say, like, so if someone's walking on the ice, you could say, ʼayaa, they slipped. That can also work for like they slipped. And so I know that verb. And as we look at the wonderful work that's been done by Xwaayeenáḳ, by Jeff Lear, by Carrie Eggleston, it's like we're just figuring out all these verbs that we haven't written down yet.
Right.
It's because like you can change them so much. Like if you could say ʼayaa, but once you put xus on it, that's a new verb. You've made a new verb out of that.
Right.
And so you could probably say ʼayaa, like I put my hand on it and it slipped. Same thing.
Right.
Right. Okay. But this is big stuff. And so we're just sort of like messing around with this and looking at it. So thoughts or questions? Don't get overwhelmed. Xing is a big language. We have lots of time.
When I look at that and I see the JI, I think of hand, not classifier.
Yeah, because you could say ʼatwudjakain, they jumped around. And that j is the class. And so you could probably have something that has j and j right in a row. Like
now, there's a sentence from Kashkawu. Gsmåat Jindagut. War party. What does the JI mean there?
Attack.
But what's the J? I can't find the JI in Xa in the dictionary either. So is that you got to do the same thing there?
Okay, so let's go look for Xa. So I think we'll find Xa. We're gonna go up into the non-verbal stuff. So we'll go to underline X, and we'll go look for Xa. So I think that's a high, long A. So we're gonna go short, low, short, high, long, low, and we're looking for long and high, and that gets us to here. So Xa is one of two things. It's a pod of usually killer whales, or it's a war party, a group of canoes. So this is very cool because in Lingít, if you have more than one killer whale, you have a pod, Xa. And if you have more than one canoe, you also have Xa. So a pod of killer whales and a fleet of boats are talked about in the exact same way in Lingít, which is very fun. The other fun part is if you think about a long time ago, they'd look out and see a boat coming, like, hey, a boat's coming. Maybe they want to trade. I wonder who that is. You look out and say, hey, 3 boats are coming. Get your gear because they're probably coming to fight, right? And so we would that's a group of canoes, it's Xa, or a group of killer whales.
Imagine somebody being like, Ḳuwdlig.
Yep.
Oh, Ţlukūdzi.
Oh yeah, so you'd probably want to say Kitcha.
Yeah.
And so, so now let's go look up good, right? So what we're going to learn right now is there are some verb roots that have an awful lot of verbs with them. And one of them is gut. So as we go through this, we see to walk, to return, basically, to walk, to follow, to go to the bathroom, to walk kind of usually upwards, to go inside of, to come inside of something, to appoint someone to a position. Now we get j, because you said j de gut. So here's j, here's the d plus 0. This is to attack. So like when you're going to put the halibut hook in the water, they'll say, that halibut's going to attack you. And you spit on it, and then you put it in the water. That's like an old school way of putting a halibut hook in the water. You got to pump it up like it's going to attack you. And so a few years ago, I did these anti-Valentine Day cards because I did Valentine Day cards, and then somebody sent me a message, said, well, I'm splitting up, so I want some anti-Valentine Day cards. So I made one that says, I think it says, Ye ekasatini, or is it kade jik kwadagut. When I see you, I'm going to attack you. So this is to attack. So then we can see some sample sentences. You see, ha eat Jew de gut. There it is, eat. Ha etinach ʼayaa yan Jew de gut. They attacked in our absence. That's really interesting. Do eat Jew de gut. The dog attacked them. Right? So that's what you get. So when you say a fleet of killer or a war party attacked, but it depends on what I forget what the other parts of what he was saying was. Yeah, they attacked. They regularly attack us, I think.
That was the other part.
What would become a slave? They're going to turn us. They're going to make us into slaves. They came to attack us to raid the village for slaves. That's the sort of long version. But yeah, that's what he was saying.
So the J here means the J, hands.
So you're going to throw these hands. Yep.
So the classifier indicates throwing hands.
Not the classifier. This one, and so that's why it's pink here. And you can hear the di. Jid, Jew, di, good. So you could say, attack me. If you're, I don't know, a lot of our lessons lead towards fighting words, but I guess they're good examples. I don't know why.
This stuff is hard.
It is, but like we keep looking at it, we go a little bit at a time. I know sometimes we jump way ahead, but that's just sort of like, well, we gotta put the boat in the water every now and then, paddle around. And then the waves get big, so we go back to the dock. So what I'd like you folks to do over the weekend is we spent the last 2 weeks writing some sentences. I know we didn't get to share them all this week. What I'd like you to do is I will put the version of this story from the Dow and Howard book. I'll put it up on our class website, tlingitlanguage.com, learning Tlingit, advanced Tlingit. I will put the audio up, and I want you to just listen to it, if you can, like 3 or 4 times. Read along maybe the first couple times, and then put the paper down and just listen to it. Don't overthink. Don't try to figure out every single thing that they're saying. Don't go looking for classifiers and roots and stuff. If you get through it like 5 or 6 times, then you have my permission to dig around into. But if you want to find a few words, I'm curious about this word, I'm curious about that. But just spend some time with some whole language, with like an incredible, when Dick Dauenhauer laughed about him, like sort of saying, that's a great story, let me tell you how it ends. He also said, you know, I sat there thinking, what does the greatest piano player in the world listen to? Who tells Ixnaawu stories that he gets impressed by? So like you're dealing with the master level storyteller here. Incredible stuff. And then we're going to keep looking at this shorter version of it. We're going to talk a little bit more concretely about the object pronoun. So you don't have to read another chapter. We've done preverb, we've done object. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, a little bit at a time. We've got all the time in the world. Don't feel like you have to figure out everything about the Tlingit verb by Tuesday or Monday when we get back together. Any questions before we go? Yukecha, Bilchish Tlein. Yewushkach Tusteen, Ḳeixwnéi Ḥánach.
Cheese.
Sheesh.
Nahuke
Ḥuwdlig.